you know. Mm. So this is on the subject of oh, the candle's out of candle, is it? Mm. Oh wow, that one's done. Had to go a cigarette light. Anyway, so in a previous video there was something about are there people who ought to be diagnosed with sensory processing disorder instead of autism on the basis of are people hearing proximal sounds as though that they were at a lower volume to distal sounds perceptually. So the hearing of the ears is normal, but or even above normal, like it's not defective. But there's a perception of distal sounds being louder than closer ones. And it sounds like it's not supposed to be that way. It sounds like a proximal sound in a room would reverberate and be at a louder volume than outside sounds. And it sounds like when you shut the door of that room and you leave the room, the sound coming from in the room should be quieter. But that's not actually the case at all. So sound engineers might have some opinions on that one, and hearing experts likewise. Nonetheless, on the basis that there is such a thing as, and it's not, it's a genuine thing of perceiving proximal sounds, perceiving rather than hearing, perceiving proximal sounds at a lower volume than a distal sounds, or they're close to being the same volume, and so that creates some kind of confusion that would contribute to some of the head tilting behaviour to listen to people talking. However, what's the evolutionary purpose of that? See, what people sometimes forget that needs to be brought up is sometimes some of the things that they're saying are developmental disorders or disabilities um, um, would have sometimes come with a sort of different the deficit in one area or skill might be because they're getting additional one in the other. So in pardon quoting Big Bang Theory, but as Bernadette Rostenkowski once put it, the part of Sheldon Cooper's brain that deals with social skills is getting a Ouija by the one that's good at maths. Um, um, so it's a really rough way of putting the idea, but technically, maths at the level that the kind of character that stereotypical and not necessarily accurate Sheldon Cooper does is he's a stereotype. Like he likes trains and everything. Okay, like it's just ridiculous. But anyway, the mathematics had its purpose in the ancient times. Like we're talking about, like before literacy. When people were running around buck naked, or in animal skins or something. Way back when, and which is also stereotypical. But anyway, there it is. And as an assumption that if you don't have all the same talents and abilities as the status quo wants you to have, then maybe you're the problem. So um, probably some people have noticed that dyslexic people are really fluent when they talk. Their reading and writing's not so good, and they do process language difficulty and sometimes struggle with it. But actually, they're also quite fluent at language and wordplay and things like that. So they're not incapable of communication. It's also the case that people with attention deficit disorder sometimes, not always, are very good at kind of aesthetic abilities. So they might be very athletic people or agile people who need to move around a bit more, and when they're hyper focused, they can at times hyper focus on a task, but they might not be able to focus in certain types of environments or situations. So there's a certain type of cognitive talent that they have that is taken up a bit more, what you might call cognitive reserve than than the other ones. So it's almost like something like it's so good at one thing, it's getting in the way of the other. So in some respects, that quote is kind of helpful, despite the fact that that TV show is enormously stereotypical, and not necessarily accurate either. So um, with that sort of thing, with the idea that the body language thing that's associated with Asperger's, which is the um, looking away and tilting the head type of thing to be able to hear the language because the world's too fucking loud. It's too noisy. Trying to pay attention to you. They're not actually deaf. It's just they're actually like they've got like they might even have, in some cases, not all, supersonic hearing. Like imagine if you had supersonic hearing. It could be quite an interesting set of circumstances. It might even be associated with a city. Do you know what a city is? Um, so there is such a thing as a relationship between light and sound, and it's as follows. If you want to understand it from a conventional type of wisdom type of thing rather than a spiritual wisdom type of thing, you might talk about the photovoltaic effect. So every time a person talks, sound particles, air particles, are vibrated by the tongue and the larynx and things like that, and so air moves out of the mouth, and the air particles change their shape, and the atoms do whatever atoms do, and in some cases they might cationize or ionize and subsequently share electrons. Now, should that happen, an electron has jumped orbit, and an electron jumps orbit, the photovoltaic effect happens, and when the photovoltaic effect happens, well, wouldn't you know it, you get light language. So light language might be an example of the photovoltaic effect in action in a rather extraordinary set of circumstances. And the other thing as well is with sound. If you're exposed to sound, if it affects atoms, it could, sound is atoms moving around as air particles, or molecules or whatever, and so technically, as they do that, there's little sparks of light coming out of them being emitted, and it's rather interesting. So you might see, like, if you've ever noticed, like there's little sparkles in the breeze as the air particles pop out little photovoltaic effects as they whiz by. So it's almost beautiful. It's an almost beautiful way. It's almost beautiful way of looking at chemistry. Anyway, so the poetry and the chemistry, and so if that's the case, and somebody has a natural talent for what you might call hearing things at a distance, as well as the volume of something close by, that means they might actually have really good hearing, not really bad hearing, and the perceptual difference is trying to filter out the local versus the non-local hearing. So what someone next to you is saying versus the truck driving up the street type of thing. The thing is, when that truck's driving up the street and the wheels are screeching and the brakes are screeching and all these air particles are coming off and whizzing by with photovoltaic effects and stuff like that, and the person's talking, there's photovoltaic effects happening, and there's a breeze going past and there's photovoltaic effects happening, and and your clothes are itching and they're flying about and there's photovoltaic effects happening because as things move, as particles move, it could be the case, in some cases, not all, that atoms, electrons move, and that produces the photovoltaic effect. So there's a lot of light whizzing about when that happens, being emitted by particles, by atoms and stuff like that. And so it's not visible light usually, but it does in fact happen. And that sort of way of looking at things, that kind of person might be able to perceive light at a distance as a consequence of that. So they might be able to perceive light in advance of it going towards their head because, well, actually no, they wouldn't be able to do that. This is where it gets really, really, really strange. They say light is faster than sound. Okay, so this is going to really bust your noodle. Okay, the light that comes out of the air particles during the photovoltaic effect will reach you before the sound does. Okay, get this. The light that comes out of the photovoltaic effect will reach you before the sound does. So that means if the truck is already screeching up the road and you can't hear it, it will make a light beam. If a tree falls in a forest, it'll make a light beam even if you're not there to hear the sound. And that light beam can hit you before the sound does. Dun dun dun. And guess what? That means it's possible to do what? It means it's possible to have precognition. So if a light beam is produced from a photovoltaic effect and it hits you before the sound associated with the event does, then the sound is probably associated with regular motion of objects, okay? Because you know, stuff moving actually caused that to start off with, and you could if light beams were coming off, say, an ambulance, okay? So light beams are coming up an ambulance. The ambulance is like several kilometres away. It's screeching up the road. You can't hear it and you can't see it. Those light beams could reach you in advance of the ambulance, being anywhere within your physical visibility range or your audible range, and you could potentially pick up on that information. And that would be classified as technically precognition. So, does precog sound like it's crazy now? So, when you put it that way, the other thing too, and this is gonna bust your noodle. Okay, if you've got a talent for distance hearing, okay, like sounds at a distance are the same as they are close by, then you think light's bright as well, then you're probably picking up on a lot of that photovoltaic effect stuff too. That means what? Well, if it's precog, dear, you've got a city. So maybe autistic people aren't socially maladapted so much as they're gifted at precog because of the photovoltaic effect. If anyone steals that fucking idea, you quote fugly old maid right now. That's a bloody good one.